Ladies and gentlemen of the Facebook world and everyone in the world who's watching this, welcome to the Enlightenpreneurs Podcast. I am Justin Minott. I'm here with my business partner, Dave Gold. Dave, give a wave.
Justin, Panache, great to be here.
And we have the great Panache Desai, and I mean great in all of the senses of the word, because you're making a massive difference. But I genuinely believe that you are who you say you are, and that's a really fun thing. Yeah, you're a lot more than a personality. I think that's a blast. So excited to have you here. For those of you who are new to the Enlightenpreneurs, we are a community of like-hearted entrepreneurs, people who really are making a difference in the world in tangible ways and bringing light and love to the world through business specifically. So that's going to be a bit of our conversation today. Dave, why don't you introduce Panache a bit more and talk about how you got connected with him?
So I have the pleasure of listening to this, not just communing with this gentleman every morning with my wife for between 1 and 25 minutes, and I've been doing that for the last couple of months, and also tuning into his alignment sessions, activation sessions in the morning. And briefly, I had 32 years of gurus, and when Julie came to me and said, you really got to listen to this Panache Desai guy, I had a little bit of PTSD, Panache, I got to tell you. It wasn't exactly kicking and screaming, but it wasn't like, yeah, she had to ask a few times. And then when I saw you, I thought, son of a gun. In one way, he's like these other people, he's bringing people back to their essential self, and he's bringing them to inner peace. And it's obviously he's coming from a place of love and connectivity, but there wasn't any of the guru stuff. So my question, and what you are bringing, and this will be the end of my introduction and my soliloquy here, is that you are bringing this divine into the world through these thousands, 10,000 people every morning. And I'm wondering what the evolution was from your experience in 2003 to where you are now, manifesting this in the world in so many different ways.
So I have to begin at the beginning a little bit and give credit to my grandmother, because it really began with her. You know, for the first 5 years of my life, I was raised by her. She would chant, she would pray, she would meditate, and I was raised in this atmosphere of prayer and worship. And what we've discovered now, thanks to Bruce Lipton's work and many other of my colleagues' work and research, is that what happens in the first 7 years is very formative and pivotal as to who you become later in life. And so when you think about it, the stage was set for me from the beginning. And as much as I may have deviated away from that through the course of my life and gotten involved in music and the rave scene in the UK and then got involved in other distractions, that core foundation of spirituality was always there for me. And so being Indian, I've always been very skeptical. David, I've had the same kind of relationship with the whole guru paradigm that you have, because people seem to lose sight of the truth that God, guru, and self are one. So then there's no hierarchy. So then everybody's the same. So then what's the point? The point is to make it available to all people, right? And so as I've gone through my evolution, I realized that I needed to have a direct experience. Like, I'm the kind of person, because I'm very skeptical and because I'm Indian and because we've got this long history of gurus and teachers, I wanted to experience what the divine was for myself, right? In simple terms, what is our potential? Who are we, right? Even if we take it out of the context of spirituality, like, what is our potential? And in my sincere yearning, I had this experience of this infinite ocean of light. This infinite presence of light is who we all are. Every single one of us. And the feeling associated with this presence is one of love that's beyond any human definition we could ever give it. And what's interesting about my experience, because subsequently I went on to research it a little bit and look at other people that had some experiences, is that it's exactly the same experience that people have in near-death experiences. They all talk about experiencing this infinite light and presence as the truth of who they are. And they all describe the feeling associated with it as a love that's beyond description. So in that experience, all of a sudden, my whole life made sense to me. Every distraction, everywhere where I doubted myself, everywhere where I denied myself, everywhere where I disempowered myself, everywhere where I projected my onto another person, the whole thing made sense to me, the entire thing. And I also was shown very clearly, this love has been flowing through me life. Up until that moment, it was happening unconsciously. But here's where it gets really cool. It's flowing through all of us right now. We're programmed and conditioned out of this state of being. You've been programmed and conditioned out of your natural state. And so for me, And somebody actually described this phenomenon. They said, Panache, you know what you're doing is democratizing all of these states of being. You're getting rid of the hierarchical structure and you're providing everybody direct access to themselves. And I think that that's the best description, because that's the point or stage in life or living that we're all in. We're all in this era and stage of personal empowerment. And
So
so this return to our natural state is the return to that love. Yeah.
that can be a very disruptive thing to the religious orders, or to, you know, to say that we're democratizing this and everyone is this and is accessible. It's accessible to all of us. What's the response been in your journey to that?
Actually, it's been wonderful because I've realized that when people used to show up to challenge me or to have an opinion about me or something, it was just an aspect of myself that was insecure or afraid.
Hmm.
And so what I've realized is that the more I've embraced who I am at the level of my humanity, the less I need people to show up to challenge me or to confront me or to offer an opposing idea or opinion. Why? Because for me now, it's as natural as breathing.
Hmm.
Right? So our life, Justin, is only ever reflecting back to us who we are, right? Like I'll be mentoring a CEO who's got an issue in a division in his company, and he'll give me a description of what's going on. I said, listen, great, turn and face the division, get your compass out and figure out where it is, and just face the division, close your eyes. And I said, just imagine from a place of peace, the resolution coming into being. Literally, as soon as he finished visualizing this resolution coming into being, he had the phone call, the problem in that had been resolved, and that division went on to being the highest producing division in his company, in his business.
Wow.
So when you talk about this in terms of who we are and how we live, like when you really begin to get this, the applications are universal. And the greatest application is in the area of business. Why? Because we're in relationship.
Hmm.
What's business really about? It's about loving people. It's simple. You know, people in the business world say adding value. Great. What is that? Love people, serve people. That's all it is. That's what business is. Find an innovative way to love people and serve people. That's it. And the more authentic it is, the more the side effect of that is the success and all of that other stuff that doesn't mean anything after all.
Hmm.
Right? And
So that's
so,
the irony of it all, is all the things
yeah.
we're facing actually don't mean a thing.
Right. So this is where I've been very blessed is the fact that the more I've been able to embrace my insecurity or my fear or whatever it is in me that was doubting, the less I've needed to have that come at me from outside of me.
Wow.
One of the things that I've noticed as I've been tuning into you is that, and it gets back to the democratization, because my first teacher said 1 in a million. That's the odds of getting enlightened. So you're going to be that 1 in a million, you know, which really took you out of the world. And there's a way that you're meeting people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what's being called, what do you feel is being in this particular moment? Because I've been through with the pandemic and the racial divide and all these things. What do you feel is being most called out from you in this moment in terms of bringing this love and light into the world?
So I think the first thing that people need to know is we're all already enlightened. It's not a question of becoming enlightened. We're just revealing the enlightenment that already exists. So everyone can just take a breath and relax. We're already enlightened. The second thing is that the collective shadow, the collective unconscious of humanity is being brought into our awareness. So we're basically maturing into a loving community, into a loving society. And what are we seeing? Everything that we haven't loved, everything that we have embraced, everything that we have denied, everything that we've repressed is coming up. It's being brought to the surface individually and collectively. And every person right now on the world stage is acting out their role perfectly to highlight all of these inequalities, to highlight these injustices. Why? So that we can bring them into our awareness. We can finally pull them out from under the rug and acknowledge that they exist and begin to address the wounding that we have that's generational or ancestral that we continue to carry forth into the modern world. This is a time of the resolution of these old wounds that we've been carrying around, these ancestral and generational wounds, right? Because what is the shadow? What is the unconscious? The unconscious is repressed emotion and suppressed memory. That's what the unconscious is. So what are we doing? We're bringing it into the light. And that's really what transformation is. Actually, the irony, David, is that the word guru is out of darkness into light. It's not a person. It's anyone who facilitates that process, right? It's anyone who engages in that alchemy. And so that's the age that we're living in. Is this time of revelation, this time of revealing the unconscious so that we can be with it, embrace it, and ultimately get to a point where we can accept it and then love it and then have it be gone on behalf of every future generation.
Can you talk more about that? Because I know for a lot of our listeners right now, the arising is very obvious, right? It's happening, it's all coming to the surface. There's a lot of now what? What do I do with this darkness? What do I do with what I'm seeing in me? There's a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of emotions coming up. And so when this arises and you're seeing it in yourself or you're seeing it in society, then what? How do we deal with that uncomfortable, ugly, what might look ugly to us? What do we do with that then?
So the main way to meet what's showing up right now is with acceptance and with compassion. Why? Because none of what you're experiencing actually originates from you, right? So suffering is inauthentic. Your natural state of being isn't suffering. You were born into a world where suffering is the norm. So you've been normalized. So what you do with it is you relax into it and you embrace it. And here's where it becomes magical. What we've done is we've been conditioned into a hierarchy of human emotion. There are certain emotions that are socially acceptable and certain emotions that aren't. However, it's all just emotion. It's all just energy in motion is how I would describe it. It's all just emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do with it? We feel it. We allow it to be there. We allow it to be present. And the most important thing is that we become accountable and responsible for it, because nothing can get activated inside of us that isn't in us in the first place, right? So this is where I've been disrupting the whole transformational model, because it's been about getting something outside of you or merging with something outside of you, right? Thus far. And what I'm saying is, listen, none of it's outside of you. We're self-enclosed units of experience. And the skill set that we lack, whether that be in our personal lives or in our professional lives, is how do we deal with being human? How do we deal with our emotions? What do we do with the thoughts? What do we do with the, these beliefs that we have? How do we uproot these generational patterns that have been living inside of us? Because the truth is, like, when I bump into a founder or a CEO, their state of consciousness, which means their state of being, becomes the culture of the company.
Yes.
So anytime I go into a business and there's an issue in the business, it always points back to one person. It's the founder or the CEO every single time, right? And depending on their willingness to evolve, they either get to stay or that's the first person that we have to get rid of, because they're the limitation, right? They're also the most attached to the outcome.
Right.
So what we have to do is recognize, hey, wait a minute, my life is an expression of me. My business is me. Like, all of this is who I am. Let me be responsible and accountable for my portion of it, for what it is that I have to feel inside of me. And let me be free of that. Let me at least come into an acceptance of my humanity, because the more I do that, the more I'm able to remain at peace in the midst of it. And that peace is power. That peace is success. Justin, I've had the pleasure of meeting some of the most successful people in the world and mentoring them, working with them. And you know what? They don't have a moment of peace in their lives.
Wow.
They don't have a moment of being able to appreciate everything that they've accumulated and everything that they've amassed. They can't sit still. Why? Because their whole identity is tied up in being a unit of production. Their whole identity is tied up in producing. Why? So they can consume at a higher and higher level, because there's always a more expensive car. There's always a more expensive home, right? There's always a more expensive membership to something, right? There's no shortage of things to consume. So it's a vicious cycle. But at some point, we have to determine our value beyond our ability to produce and consume. Who are we? What are we really? We're units of love. We're units of loving expression. This is really who we are. And when we start from that place, all of these things that are showing up, we cultivate an inclusive relationship with them.
Right.
This is what's happening right now, brothers. We need to cultivate an inclusive relationship with ourselves, so we have an inclusive relationship with everyone else in the world.
That's radical.
Yeah, I want to play off that inclusivity, because what you find is a lot of people feel like, oh, I've got to balance these two, or somehow, like, my first teacher said, don't eat at the altar. It's going to take you away from God if you actually get too successful, right? And now we are creating a model, and you talked about it this morning in your 11 o'clock session about creativity, bringing creativity. Mm-hmm. And there's some way where that creative impulse can take you to God, or take you to productivity. And I'm wondering how you can help people who feel this ambivalence about, the world, the divine world, the divine and the world, and how they can actually bring those together into a single unity of creativity.
So for me, I don't get what the difference is, because it's the same mechanism. You're basically allowing yourself to be inspired, and you're acting on that inspiration. What is spirituality? Receiving inspiration, and you're embodying it, right? Or emanating out into the world. But it's the same mechanism. And this is fascinating. Like, I have a lot of friends that are musicians or actors or actresses and creative artists. I love artists, or fashion designers, right? People that are really creative, right? And here's the thing. It's the same mechanism. There's something greater than them flowing through them into this world. And they're simply the translator for that unique expression in its own way, right? Whether it's fashion, whether it's, Kanye with his Yeezys, right? Or Jay-Z with his music, right? Whoever it is, it doesn't matter. But it's just something flowing through them that they're allowing to come into this world. And that's what my whole life has been. What's happening through me has nothing to do with who I am as a person. I only really have one talent, and that's that I've figured out how to get out of the way and allow life to happen, right? And allow whatever wants to happen, right? But once you get that, you can then begin to move into this place where you are infinitely creative, right? So somebody commented the other day, we're now 101 deep into these call to calm meditations in a row, right?
Wow.
We haven't done the same meditation twice in 101 days. Every single day when you show up, it's a different meditation. It's a different subject, a different topic. And it's why? Because it's what's relevant to what's happening now. And that's not something that I'm planning. It's just what wants to be expressed. So when we think about ourselves as units of expression, instead of units of production and consumption, we begin to tap into something that nature demonstrates all the time. Squirrels don't go to self-help seminars. Right? Like, cows don't want to discover their true self, right? Like, everything in nature is just being itself, right? We're the only species that questions the perfection of our design. Why? Because this is how far we've moved away from being natural. So creativity arises in your willingness to be vulnerable and natural, and to allow something greater to flow through you into this world, as does entrepreneurship. That's how the iPod came into being. Now, the execution left a lot to be desired, and the alienation of his co-workers and colleagues left a lot to be desired. But the idea and the innovation came from that place of connection.
So you talk about getting out of your own way, and that's really the gift, and why you're able to move the way you do. What is in the way of getting out of our own way? Like, how do we do that?
That's the question of all questions. Our humanity. And it's not that it's in the way, it's just that we don't know how to be with it. Nobody ever gave us the manual about how to deal with our humanity. We're trying to overcome it. We're trying to adapt in the presence of it. We're apologizing for it. We're making excuses for it. But the one thing that we haven't been shown how to do is to love it, is to accept it. Every limitation once embraced becomes limitless. So in a business, if there's an issue or a problem, once you accept it and embrace it, all of a sudden that has the capacity to turn into your biggest revenue generator. Okay? Because it's potential, you see? And being a human being is an expression of pure potential. So the very second we stop fighting against our design, and we get the perfection of who we are, our design, our uniqueness, that doesn't mean that anyone else is ever going to get it. It doesn't mean that we're going to fit in and belong ever because we're unique. But it means that we have been created perfectly. We've been designed perfectly for this particular moment in history to bring through us whatever it is that we're here to bring through us, right? And that can be whatever it is, a product, it can be a design, it can be an innovation, it can be a technology, whatever that is. But you can't get there if you're at odds with who you are, if you're at odds with your humanity, if you're constantly fighting against yourself. Man, I wish I wasn't that way. Why do I behave that way? How much time do we spend wishing away ourselves?
Man, you're reading my journal. Like, that's,
right?
yeah, that's good.
Right. So this is how we come into a profound acceptance of ourselves, and then we return to flow. So acceptance opens us up to flow. And that flow can be whatever, music, it can be acting in a movie, it can be meditations every morning, whatever that is. It's the same mechanism, the same process.
I see both of us have a copy of your book here. You Are Enough.
Yeah.
And dealing with entrepreneurs, dealing with anyone, there's a sense that I've got to get to a certain point before I can be successful in self-development or in the business. There's some infinite postponement of the abundance that they're looking for until something is reached. How do you, I mean, I guess you said 100 ways, how do you start dislodging people from this idea that there's more that needs to be done before they can start living?
I think the way you start from is where you're going to finish. I mean, if you don't start from fulfillment, you're not going to end up there. And there are two types of entrepreneurs. There are entrepreneurs who are on a mission to prove their value and their worth because they started from pain, rejection, and abandonment.
Wow.
Or there are entrepreneurs who started from inspiration and they're not on a mission to prove anything. Those are the people that wake up every day. They're just happy to be alive. They're excited to be able to do what they do, and they go to bed at night grateful, right? And that's the difference. So the first question for the entrepreneurial community is, what's fueling you? Is your pain and fear fueling you? Your insecurities fueling you? Or is love fueling you? Is your passion fueling you? Because there's a dramatic difference. Because if your pain's fueling you, guess what? You're going to leave a trail of carnage in your wake. Your success will be completely unsustainable. And every dollar that you make, you're going to have to pour back into your family, your health, whatever it is, all of the things that you didn't take care of along the way. But guess what? If you're operating from love and passion, and your business is a natural extension of you, then none of those things fall by the wayside. And actually, the truth is, you're just happy and grateful now, which is where you end up. You're fulfilled now, which is where you end up. You see? Mm-hmm. So this whole notion of hustling is nonsense. There's some point where your hustle becomes a liability, right? So when you're in survival, you have to hustle. Why? Because you don't know any better. So you think you have to push harder, work harder, longer, strive more, right? Outwork, blah, 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 blah. But eventually you realize it's completely unsustainable. Eventually you have a wake up that shows you that it's unsustainable. And then as you mature in your entrepreneurial journey and you kind of evolve beyond that toddler kind of adolescent phase, which is, I'm going to show you, screw you, right? Into, now, wait a minute. How do we make this sustainable? How do we make this so that it's enjoyable? How do we make this so that it's collaborative and fun every day, right? And all I'm saying is, let's not go through the pain. Let's start from that place of curiosity and openness around where we're coming from and around the outcome that we wish to see in the world. Because I promise you, where you'll start from is where you'll finish. I've seen the beginning, the middle, and the end. And when it doesn't start well, it doesn't end well, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
So what about people who have started from that place and you just described exactly where they are, right? That I started from pain and lack and trying to prove something or try to prove my worth on the planet. What do they do from here? Is the path through acceptance, or what does that look like to actually transform your life and thus transform your business?
Well, the first thing is to have enough courage to have that moment of vulnerability, to acknowledge that you have everything that you always wanted and you're miserable. That's the first thing. We have to start there. We have to start from who you've become. And who you've become is somebody that's successful, but you're miserable. So you have everything that your business life could offer you, but because you don't have any peace, you don't have any connection, you don't have any acceptance of self, it's horrible. There's nowhere else for you to go. The only option is to continue to try and success your way out of suffering, which doesn't work, right? Exactly. So typically there's some addiction or some distraction that shows up. Why? Because you have to cope with the stress that you're living under, right? So we have to, first of all, start with a reality check. Great, I'm in business, I've begun my journey, but how do I feel every day? Like, am I actually happy about what I'm doing? Or am I just complaining, controlling, and micromanaging every day? Like, what is my state of being, right? What's the reality check? And sometimes also, life delivers you that reality check, like divorce papers, like your children writing you notes telling you that they wish you spent more time with them, right? Like a cancer diagnosis, right? So if we don't undergo that reality check as entrepreneurs and as business owners, life's going to do it for us at some point. Why? Because we have to once again be redirected toward what's important. What is it that gets you to that place in the first place? Your enthusiasm, your passion, your desire. That's what gets you there. Loving people, being of service. That's what gets you there. What keeps you there? Loving people, being of service. It's what keeps you there.
Right.
So So it's
You make it
undergoing
sound
that
so
self,
simple, Panache.
but it is simple. It's really not that complicated, you
Yeah.
know, and this, and it's simple because I've seen so many different examples of this, Justin, like so many different variations of this, brother, that it's my job to just save people time. Like, I just want to save you time. Right. So here it is. There you
Oh,
go.
thank you. Thanks for finding me now. This is really good. This is really good.
Oh gosh, I know, we know our client, we know ourselves, we know our clientele, we know that. And I can tell you what a lot of them are thinking is, I like what he says. It makes sense. Let me work myself out of pain. Okay. Let me make this another project to get from pain to love.
Yeah.
Okay. And what you do, and I know this from work, you flip it. So how can people need, like, you needed your experience to know, right? You wanted to know, you wanted to get your fingers in the side of Christ to know that God was real. Okay. So how can people know experientially that life is good without having to work their way to that?
So I think that this time of COVID and this time of self-quarantine and self-isolation has been a revelation for so many people, because what is it that we actually need every day, right? Like, when we actually examine what we need every day, what is that? Well, if you're like me, you probably need like an oatmeal in the morning, some kind of light lunch, and maybe dinner, right? And a celery juice, because the wife's on the celery juice kick. So I'm like celery juicing right now. I am a celery at this point, pretty much, right? 99.9% celery, 0.01% Indian, right?
Is
So,
it working? Are you feeling better?
it's working, because I used to love cheese sticks. And at some point we had a little battle between the cheese sticks and the celery sticks, and the celery stick army won that battle, bro. They won. So I have no desire anymore to eat cheese sticks.
You had to
So,
replace the addiction. That's good.
well, I figured, you know what, this is why you have kids, right? To eat their snacks. Like, it's why you have them. Like, we have great organic snacks. Like, those of you that are dads,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
watching the game, you're reaching for the Annie's cheddar bunny ears. What's wrong with that? You know, it's like, so anyway, so, so how do we shortcut that time? Self-awareness. It's all about self-awareness. It's all about self-awareness. If you are not self-aware, right, then all of a sudden it takes a long time. But the quicker you become self-aware, the less time it takes, right? So loving and embracing yourself where you are now is the beginning of that journey, but it's also the end of the journey, just to save you time. So we don't have to make it another project. We don't have to make it another to-do list item, okay? All we need do is realize, wait a minute, like, I am out of alignment with my life. Like, all right, I've got everything, but I don't feel good. How about I start to recreate my life around how I want to feel, which is one of the big things that I go through with people that I mentor personally. The reason why you don't feel how you want to feel in the end is because you didn't take it into consideration every step of the way. So I'll give you an example. For me, how I want to feel is peaceful. So if there's a business decision that in some way infringes on my peace, I won't do it, because I know how I want to feel.
Right.
Right. So once you understand
Hmm.
that peace is at a premium and that your time is your only commodity, you begin to prioritize that which feels the way you want to feel. Right. So I will align my choices and decisions and how I'm showing up with how I want to feel every day. Because if I'm doing that, then I'm heading in the direction of how I want to be at the end of the whole thing, which is peaceful. And it's also, by the way, what I want to deliver to the world. So if I'm not prioritizing my peace, how can I deliver that experience to the world? There's no way.
Wow. Wow. That is a really powerful statement. So you're actually making decisions based on your state of being,
Mm-hmm.
like almost exclusively.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Like, somebody can say, oh, hey, come do a keynote in X, Y, and Z, and here's a bag of money. And I'll be like, no, sorry.
So
Why? Because I don't need the money. This is the other thing too. For those of you that are entrepreneurs, the person who lives with an absence of need has all of the leverage in the world. When you understand who you are and you understand your value, and you no longer have any need, like, people can't dangle a carrot in front of you and pull you out of your state of being, you're free. From that moment on, your entrepreneurial life will be a home run, because you won't compromise your integrity, your values, and the energy that you began with for a bag of money. It's that simple.
Wow.
what the way you're living your life, you don't even think not to trust. right? It's just so predicated on trust that if I can trust how I feel, which is not something that comes naturally to people, and
There you
particularly.
go. That's a good point.
So, I mean, I kind of, this is batting practice fastball for you, Panache.
Okay.
Where does your trust come from?
Your trust comes from, once again, restoring your relationship with yourself. And the reason why you don't trust the world is because you don't trust yourself anymore. So like, for example, when I start with somebody, I'll say to somebody, what makes you happy? The sad thing is that most people don't even know the answer to that question, because they've been living their lives for every other person, or trying to live up to other people's standards and expectations that they don't even know what makes them happy anymore.
Mm.
So our trust comes from restoring our inner integrity. What is that? That is feeling everything that we have to feel inside of us. It means embracing who we are. It means being at peace with who we are. That's where our trust comes from. It doesn't come from outside of us. It doesn't come from some external circumstance, because being in business is like, it's like permanently being in the Wild West. You never know what's going to happen, right? As much as you think you know what's going to happen, you never know what's going to happen. So you have to be able to flow with what's happening. But if you're a control freak and you had your metrics and analytics you had laid out for this year, and then coronavirus, you're pretty upset right now, right? So how do we get to that place? We get to that place by being able to flow. We get to that place of being able to accept and embrace. So my trust comes from being alive long enough now to know that no matter what arises, no matter what it is, it's going to work out. So that's not to say that things don't happen in my life on a daily basis. Like the air conditioning wasn't working yesterday. Okay, great. The air conditioning is not working. Turn a fan on, do the stream, right? It is what it is. It's working now, right? So if you've lived long enough, you can see that in time, harmony and balance is always restored in your life. It always is.
Right.
So your trust, the reason why we don't trust is because we think that somebody else is in charge of our destiny and our life and our reality, and they're not. When we have a shift at the level of feeling, we have a shift in our state. When we have a shift in our state, we have a shift in our neurology and our biology and in the experience of our reality. What does that mean? That means you have the ability to determine the outcome of your life based on how you're willing to feel. I've seen people transform chronic illnesses and diseases. I've seen people overcome relationship issues they didn't think that they were able to get beyond. I've seen people overcome business issues, credit crunches, that you're just like, okay, how? But the very second you begin to shift how you feel, you begin to get in that place of love, appreciation, and joy, then all of a sudden you shift at the level of the mind, you shift at the level of the body, and you shift at the level of your life. And so just try it as much as possible. Come back to peace, rest in the awareness of your breath. Just observing your breath puts you back into a state of peace and coherence. It allows you to relax. It allows you to be peaceful and present. I just watched the Bruce Lee doc, Be Like Water. It allows you to be like water. It allows you to flow. It allows you to remain fluid with life. And what you realize is that life isn't the enemy. There's nothing out there trying to undo you. What's going to undo you is what's inside of you that you haven't dealt with. Simple. So deal with it.
Wow.
Deal with it.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. So if you are on the Facebook live event, please put your questions in the comment box. We'll keep the conversation going, and I will pay attention to that over the next couple minutes. I do want to spend a minute on this. So I hopped into one of your meditations, and you said at the start, you said, hey, this is going to be the hardest one I've ever done. And I said, oh, perfect. This is the one I hop in on. And you went through this concept about, I want what I have. I want what I have. Can you explain that? Because that was a very powerful session for me, and something that I think is so counterintuitive to how we're wired as entrepreneurs, or what we're trained as entrepreneurs, I should say, not wired. Can you explain that concept a little bit more?
I have a dear friend of mine back in Naples who became very successful through his family butcher shop in Wisconsin. And one day I had the pleasure of sitting down with him and having lunch with him. He's a very spiritual guy, but also very successful in business. And so we have great conversations and great interactions. And I sat down with him and I said, listen, so what's the deal? Like, at what point did everything shift to you? He said, Panache, well, I realized I was praying for all the wrong things. the very second I realized that I was praying for all of the wrong things, I began to pray the following prayer. So, would you like to know what it is? I said, absolutely would I like to know what it is, because he has a great life. He said, Panache, he said, I prayed the following prayer. Dear God, I want to experience whatever you want me to experience, and I'm willing to accept it fully. Now, he didn't realize what he had articulated, but he had stumbled upon a way to perfectly align with your life the way that it is, to align with what's unfolding. You see, we don't want what we have. We've been conditioned to believing there's something better, there's something greater, the grass is greener. Even when we start in our entrepreneurial business, we don't want the business that we've created. We want to start another one. We think we should be diversifying into other product lines, right? We should be doing something else, right? Because this is the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is to want something other than what's present, right? So when you get that your power comes from wanting what you have, you're free.
Right.
And you'll realize that there's a big theme with me around freedom, because I want to be free. I want freedom. I want to have a sense of inner freedom and outer freedom. And that's what, America and this entrepreneurial journey provides you, right? Not to say that it isn't available in other parts of the world. It is, but I've experienced it here so profoundly, right? I mean, just look, I show up every day. I share my passion and my love for people through meditation every morning. And I'm able to support my family through sharing my passion and my love for the empowerment of people. Think about that. What other country in the world could I do that? Very few, right? So it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter how niche your area of interest is. It doesn't matter. The blessing is if you show up and you show up loving and wanting to be of service, all of these things that everyone else is trying so hard to get to will naturally come into your life. Why? Because you want what you have. Don't be distracted. Don't be distracted by all of these other carrots that are being dangled in front of you. And I'm going to save you time. After I did Oprah and I did the interview and I got this huge book deal, right? Like a 7-figure plus book deal from Penguin Random House, I was at my most miserable.
Wow.
In my life, right? So that's a big wake-up call to most people on their entrepreneurial or creative endeavor. Success doesn't equal happiness. It's not going to bring you joy. Why? Because all of a sudden I was a part of an industry that, because I'm Indian, wanted me to become like Deepak, or wanted me to become like somebody that they could understand the lifetime earnings value of, right? So in that moment, all of a sudden you have a choice, right? And I think Dave Chappelle went through the same thing, right? Like $60 million from the Comedy Central. He went through the same thing. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Am I going to compromise who I am in order to have this deal and this success? Or am I going to stay true to who I am? And I tell you something, the people that stay true to who they are happy, and they're able to be in it for the long haul. Those people that choose to compromise who they are in order to have that money or that notoriety or that fame or that success are miserable. And I was also fortunate enough to be in an industry or a genre where all of my peers and colleagues are 40 years older than me, 30 to 40 years older than me. So we would have very honest, transparent conversations about how they were doing and what their life was like, right? And they would all say to me, Panache, listen, you just keep doing you. Like, you keep showing up as you are. Don't change a thing. In fact, I sat down with Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God, one day at a conference that I was at. It was an author conference. I didn't even have a book at the time. And he sat down and he said, listen, he said, you're destined to just do 2 stadiums a year and that'll be it. Right? Well, now I'm doing a stadium a day.
Right.
Literally, like 10,000 people is like a small stadium every day from all over the world. People come together in this virtual space of peace, right? And this is the blessing of being yourself. It's the blessing of remaining true to you. And it's also the blessing of deploying patience. Being patient, deploy patience in your entrepreneurial journey and in your business life. What's the rush, right? Everyone wants to 10X and scale and, IPO and blah, blah, blah. If you're in blockchain, ICO, whatever. Why? What's the rush? You're living the good old days. I want what I have now. Why? Because I'm never going to have this moment again. I'm never going to have this phase of my life ever again. I only get to live it once. I never come back to the same moment twice.
Right.
Want what you have in your business, want what you have in your personal life, and you'll access power.
And the irony is that, as you said earlier, that there's so much power in coming without needs. That is when you can do anything. You are completely need free, and you are in the position of power at that point, which is so ironic and so upside down compared to how most of us think. I want to make sure we talk about your call to calm sessions and the 9 a.m.s. They're completely free meditations for anyone to hop on. What can people expect when they hop in 9 a.m. session with Panache?
So the genesis of the call to calm meditations was my own experience of going through global crisis as well as personal crisis. In 2001, I was in the ashram living a very simple monastic life, and September the 11th rolled around. All of a sudden we were meditating, we were about to go to lunch, and we were like, it's very surreal, completely out of the context of that life. All of a sudden somebody said, oh, there's a terrorist attack in New York. And we all ran into the canteen, turned on these TVs, and bro, it was like watching a movie. It was like the most unbelievable thing I had ever seen. And in that moment, instead of worrying about ourselves or how this was impacting us or our families, we immediately went into service. How can we help people? So that was my first entry point into service. Then in 07, 08, and 09, same thing. You know, the world was kind of readjusting itself and reorienting itself. And that made it was, and at that point it was a self-imposed kind of banking crisis that was unfolding. However, the ramifications rippled out beyond just the banking and finance world, right, to your average person on Main Street. And so then immediately, how can I be of service? And then my daughter Celeste was born with a congenital heart defect, spent the first 18 months of her life in the hospital, had 5 open heart procedures and flatlined for 8 minutes during one of her surgeries.
Wow.
And then subsequently went on to have a transplant at 18 months old. In going through that crisis, on a very personal level, I could see what we need as human beings as support. And so I was on a book tour. My book became a national bestseller. I was about to head out on the second stage of that tour. We had a 22-city tour planned. And the day before I was about to head out, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. And that was the signal that I was waiting for to pivot, because I'm always paying attention, right? Like I can feel when things are coming, but when I get the signal, I always pivot and pay attention. So I immediately called up everyone in the company. I said, listen, cancel the book tour. I cannot risk people, their health and well-being in flying anywhere right now. I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, here's what made a difference for me. Meditations made a difference for me. Communities made a difference for me. And having a consistent voice every day, telling me that I'm going to be okay and supporting me every day, which during my time with Celeste was the voice of my friend Bruce, who's now their godfather. Having that helped me get through crisis. I want to offer some version of that to all of these people that are about to have their world fundamentally rearranged. And so I immediately canceled everything, made my time completely available and accessible to everybody. And so the call to calm came into being because unless we're calm, we can't respond. I mean, people right now are making huge decisions. If you're an entrepreneur, you know, the first thing I did was get on the phone with everyone who had a business, say, listen, put your business on life support. Keep the essential organs intact and get rid of everything else. Streamline the whole operation so that you can keep operational and functional through this time of COVID-19. Because my initial feeling was 3 months. Make sure you're good for 3 to 4 months. And happily, everybody made it. Nobody had to shut down, right? But that's because we were ahead of it. And so the blessing was that call to calm came into being because I realized the need for calm, the need for the remembrance of calm. And it's been interesting because everyone that showed up in the morning has been able to go through not just COVID-19, but everything that's been going on with this arising of the awareness of all the racial injustice that we've been experiencing in the world. And now also the re-entry into work, back into the world. That's a fundamentally different world than the world before self-isolation and self-quarantine, right? So in times of uncertainty, our certainty has to come from within ourselves. And that call to calm provides you access to that certainty. And so that was the genesis of how this whole thing came into being. I wanted people to come together from all over the world to have a place to return to peace consciously and on purpose so that they could navigate some of the hardest moments of their lives, some of the toughest choices and decisions that they have to make from that place of peace.
And where do people find that information if they want to tune in to the call to calm? Because I know they are powerful sessions.
You can just head over to the website, panachedesai.com. So that's PANACHEDESAI.com.
And how did you get such a cool name?
So my uncle was at university, and a friend of his was studying French literature, and he was reading Cyrano. And it's about this portly, sword-wielding guy who has a zest and love for life. And he's dying. And as he's dying, he says, "You'll take away everything, but you'll never take away my panache." And so that's how I got my name. Because my uncle was like, well, listen, even if nothing happens in his life, he'll always have his panache.
Wow, that's a good story.
I want to say a little something to our audience, and also put a plug in here, because what makes a difference when people experience what you're talking about, actually experience that calm, and then they have a reference point. And that is one thing that I have, that Julie and I and so many others that I've turned on, I'm sure some of the 10,000 I haven't experienced, is that if you want to actually experience what Panache is talking about, from this place of peace, of starting where you want to finish, of knowing that life is good and knowing it's trust, there's direct transmission that goes with that. And I also want to speak, there's one other, we say 11 a.m., we're in the East. I know you've moved to Central, but at Eastern time that Panache does these activation sessions, miracle sessions. And I would, again, suggest that if you want a direct transformation that will take you out of the fear mode and into the love mode, in my 68 years and 40 some of them in spiritual digging, I've never found anything as powerful. And you can find that on the website as well. So I just want to thank you for bringing all that, bringing that into my life and Julie's life and so many others. It's aligned me with the perfection from which you live, and others as well.
So grateful for you, and so grateful for everyone that's called to be there. It's just a wonderful community and very supportive community. And so whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing, just recognize that, you're a beautiful being. You don't need to be healed. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be changed. You don't need to improve. If that works, how about we start to accept, embrace, and love who we are, and finally begin to be empowered to work with who we are, understand the perfection of our design, and express that in the world, whether it be through a creative expression or a business, or just even in our personal lives. That's really the next frontier. Business needs a fundamental redefinition. And that is a return to authenticity. It's a return to real human connection. And it's a return to love. It's a return to adding value and being of service, instead of caring about shareholder value and just buying back your stock, right? What are you doing to love? What are you doing to add value? What are you doing to truly make a difference? Not the perception of who you are as a company, but the reality.
Wow, well said. And your latest book, You Are Enough, I want to make sure we get some time. I know the purpose isn't to plug it, but I know it's got to be a great resource. So can you just talk, I'm sure it's everything we've been talking about here, but what can people expect if they pick that book up?
So You Are Enough came into being because of my experience with my daughter Celeste, and because of my experience getting to this kind of pinnacle of success myself, and realizing that it's empty. It tastes like ashes in your mouth. There's nothing lasting or fulfilling in it. And You Are Enough came into being through my 20 plus years of working with people individually and in groups all over the world. I realized that there's a pandemic going on that's this feeling of not being enough. The root cause of every addiction is feeling like you're not enough. The root cause of not really realizing your purpose as an entrepreneur is this feeling of not being enough. So what needs to be addressed in all of us is this feeling of not being enough. And how do we go about living from this place of being enough? Because when we start to realize that we are enough and we live from that place, all of a sudden asymmetric growth happens naturally with grace and ease. We're not pushing for it. We're not striving for it. We're not needing to make it happen. It's not a strategy. It's our relationship with ourselves. Because again, if you're an entrepreneur and a business owner, your company is you. And your company's only as good as you are, right? So if you're not good enough in who you are, there's going to be inherent deficiencies, issues, and problems that perpetually show up in your business, right? So how about we resolve what we need to inside of ourselves and be freed of this feeling of not being enough? Why? Again, because everything's responding to how we feel. It's like this, Justin, like people walk into the store, they feel the love that you have, right? That's why they come. That's the unique selling point, is the love and the authenticity that they feel. That's what draws them. You can buy products and services anywhere. But why do people come to you? Because they feel the sincerity, the authenticity, the genuineness, and the love that you have to offer that only you can offer. That's what this establishes in you. That's what this opens you up to. It's the power of your uniqueness.
Wow. Panache, thank you. This has been so juicy, so good. I really appreciate your time for hopping on with us, Dave. Oh, and I do want to give a shout out to Abby if you're listening. It's Dave's daughter's birthday. So happy birthday, Abby.
Happy birthday, Abby.
Thank you, Minott.
Yay.
And Justin, I told her she was going to get a shout out today. I mean, how lucky is she? And Panache, again, thanks. I just can't thank you enough, and for everything you're doing for so many. I just, you're just a dream come true for the world right now. You're exactly what the world needs and responding in the perfect way. So we are going to get off the recording.